The air was thick. It tasted of ash and sorrow. Smoke coiled like phantom serpents across the ravaged land. Once this valley had sung with life. Now it was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered stone. Fires still burned in the distance. They cast flickering orange glares upon the desolation. Each crackle of flame sounded like a mournful sigh. The ground itself was scarred, blackened, and weeping. It was a testament to the ferocity of the battle. A battle they thought they were winning, until everything changed, until trust turned to dust.
Liana stumbled. Her hand instinctively went to the deep gash on her arm. Her green tunic was torn and stained dark with grime and blood. Beside her, I moved with a heavy weariness. My broad shoulders sagged. My usually bright eyes were clouded with exhaustion and a deeper pain. We leaned on each other for support. Two solitary figures in a landscape of utter ruin. The silence around us was profound. It was broken only by the wind whistling through broken structures and the distant dying embers of war. We had survived. But survival felt like a hollow victory now. Liana finally spoke. Her voice was a hoarse whisper.
Why, Kai? Why would he do it? Suddenly, the very air grew colder. A new darkness began to bleed into the smoke-choked sky. It was different from the night's embrace. This was a palpable blackness. It seemed to swallow the faint, dying light of the embers. A profound sense of dread descended upon Liana and Kai. It was heavier than their exhaustion, sharper than their grief. The remnants of the battlefield seemed to hold their breath. Even the wind died down, as if in fear. Something terrible was unfolding, something ancient and malevolent. This was not the work of the betrayer alone. This was a power they had never encountered.
A figure began to coalesce from the deepest shadows. Or perhaps it was the shadows themselves taking form. It was tall, impossibly so, cloaked in swirling darkness that seemed to drink the light. No, it was more than a cloak. It was the void itself, given shape. 2 points of burning, malevolent light glowed where eyes should be. They promised nothing but oblivion. A voice echoed, not in their ears but in their minds. It was cold, ancient, and utterly devoid of emotion. Your world, it resonated, is at its end. All will return to the void.
Hope, already so fragile, seemed to crumble into nothingness before this monstrous presence. The Void King raised a hand.
News of the devastating defeat traveled fast. It arrived at Sanctuary Spire, the Resistance's hidden mountain base, like a poisoned arrow. Alarms blared. Their shrill cries echoed through the stone corridors. Red emergency lights pulsed rhythmically. They painted the anxious faces of the Resistance members in hues of blood and fear. Operators at communication consoles shouted updates. Their voices were strained with disbelief and rising panic. The Spire, usually a haven of determined calm and quiet industry, was now a hive of frantic activity. Order was fracturing under the weight of the terrible tidings.
Technicians rushed through hallways. Soldiers, still grimy from recent skirmishes, looked to their commanders for answers. But the commanders themselves were expressions of grim uncertainty. The betrayal by one of their own was a deep wound. It sowed distrust and confusion. Now reports of a new terrifying enemy began to filter through. An entity of shadow and immense power. Whispers of the Void King spread like wildfire.
Into this maelstrom of fear and confusion, a figure emerged. He walked calmly through the panicked crowds in the main hangar of Sanctuary Spire. His presence was like a sudden silence in a storm. He was cloaked in grey, his face weathered and lined, yet his eyes held a spark of ancient wisdom and an unyielding strength. Many younger members did not recognize him, but the older veterans, the leaders, stopped dead in their tracks. Whispers turned from fear to stunned disbelief.
It cannot be Elian?
He had been presumed dead for over a decade, lost in the shadow marches. The name Elian rippled through the spire. It carried the weight of legend. He was the greatest warrior of the last generation, a master strategist, a beacon of hope in darker times. His return was impossible, yet there he stood, tall and unbowed. A faint, almost imperceptible aura of power seemed to cling to him. He raised a hand, and a measure of calm settled over the immediate area.
"The Void King has returned," he stated, his gaze sweeping over the stunned faces.
Elian spoke of an ancient energy, a force almost forgotten by the world.
"It is called pulse light. It is not magic in the common sense. It is the pure essence of life, of creation itself. A radiant energy that resonates with the very fabric of existence."
The Void King, Elian explained, was its antithesis. A being of absolute negation, of unmaking. Only pulse light, focused and wielded with unwavering will, could truly harm him. It was their only weapon against the encroaching darkness. But you know, this power was incredibly rare, and mastering it was a perilous journey.
The knowledge of pulse light has been guarded by a secluded order, long thought to be extinct. I am one of its last true practitioners.
He revealed that the potential for pulse light lay dormant within certain individuals with a strong life force and an unshakable spirit. He looked towards Liana and Kai. He saw the raw grief in their eyes, but also the burning embers of their will to fight.
You and a few others may have the gift.
The training would be arduous. It would push them to their absolute limits, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So began the desperate tutelage. In a hidden chamber deep within Sanctuary Spire, Elian guided a small group. Weeks blurred into a cycle of intense training and strategic planning. The pulse light users, though few, grew stronger each day. Liana and Kai became proficient, their light now a formidable force. But the Void King's influence was spreading across the land. His shadowy armies swelled, his oppressive aura choked the life from entire regions. Sanctuary Spire was a lonely beacon of defiance in a world rapidly succumbing to darkness.
We cannot win a war of attrition. We need a decisive strike, a bold, almost reckless move.
He proposed a plan to infiltrate the Void King's newly risen fortress, the Obsidian Citadel. The Citadel was a monstrous structure. It had erupted from the earth at the site of their last defeat. It was a twisted monument of black rock and solidified shadow. It pulsed with the Void King's dark energy. Elian believed the king would be at his most powerful there, but also potentially vulnerable if they could reach its core.
The plan is fraught with peril. The Citadel will be teeming with the Void King's minions. Its defenses will be formidable. The objective is twofold: to gather intelligence on any potential weakness of the king himself, and, if possible, to plant a beacon of pulse light deep within its foundations, hoping to disrupt its dark energies.
The infiltration team was small, chosen for their skills in stealth, combat, and their nascent pulse light abilities. Liana and Kai were essential. Their synergy with pulse light was remarkable. Under the cloak of a moonless, starless night, the infiltration team departed. They flew on silent, custom-built gliders, their dark forms barely visible against the oppressive sky. The Obsidian Citadel loomed ahead. It was a jagged silhouette against the bruised horizon, radiating an almost physical coldness. The air around it was thick with the Void King's power, a suffocating presence that sought to crush their spirits before they even arrived. Liana clutched the pulse light focus Elian had given her. Its faint warmth was a small comfort against the encroaching dread. Kai, flying beside her, gave a curt nod. His face was set in a mask of concentration. Their chosen entry point was a narrow service conduit, high on one of the Citadel's lesser spires. Navigating the turbulent air currents around the fortress was the first challenge. Dark-winged sentinels, creatures of shadow and malice, patrolled the skies. The team used their gliders' cloaking technology and their own senses, honed by Elian's training, to evade detection. Several times they came perilously close. Liana used a faint pulse of her light, carefully shielded, to momentarily disorient a nearby sentinel, allowing them to slip past. The tension was a tight knot in her stomach. With a final coordinated burst of pulse light, Liana and Kai cleared a path. They, along with the surviving members of their team, managed to crash land their damaged gliders near the service conduit. They scrambled inside just as larger, more formidable shadow entities converged on their position. The conduit was dark, narrow, and reeked of decay and void energy. The air itself felt corrosive. They pressed onward, deeper into the Obsidian Citadel. The silence within was unnerving, broken only by the distant, echoing sounds of the fortress's monstrous inner workings and their own ragged breaths. The corridors of the Citadel were a nightmarish labyrinth. They twisted at impossible angles, defying logic and conventional architecture. They burst into a colossal chamber. It was a vast echoing cavern at the heart of the Obsidian Citadel. At its center, upon a throne seemingly carved from a captured star, sat the Void King. He was even more terrifying up close. His form shifted, a vortex of pure darkness, the twin points of light that were his eyes burning with cold, ancient malice. He did not rise. He simply watched them, an expression that might have been amusement flickering across his shadowy features.
So, the little lights have found their way to the abyss. Your courage is as predictable as your eventual extinction.
The battle was joined without words. Liana and Kai launched themselves at the Void King. They unleashed the full power of their pulse light. Beams of pure white energy seared the darkness. The king merely gestured. Waves of absolute void met their attacks, nullifying them, swallowing their light. He was immensely powerful, His attacks were not mere blasts of energy, but tendrils of unmaking that sought to unravel their very existence. They dodged, they shielded, they retaliated, fighting with a desperate synergy born of shared purpose and Elian's rigorous training. But each exchange left them weaker, their light dimming against his overwhelming darkness. Yet, they pressed on. They remembered Elian's words. Pulse light was his only true weakness. There had to be a way. Kai created a massive shield of light, absorbing a torrent of void energy.